Hello, everybody. I see you all joining us. We're going to wait just a minute to let folks join us, and then we'll get started here with our USAC Wellness Series. It's fun to watch all the participants roll in. Just going to give it another moment here, everybody, to let folks roll in, and we'll get started. All right. So welcome everybody to the third in a series of wellness webinars presented by the Outreach and Engagement Subcommittee as part of the University Staff Advisory Committee, USAC. We thank you for joining us today. Upcoming presentations can be found on our USAC website under News and Events and 2020-2021. Our next session is scheduled for December and will reflect on coping with COVID. So for the webinar format, attendees' cameras are turned off, microphones are muted, and the chat is disabled with the Q&A enabled. So questions may be asked anonymously if you prefer, and participants will have the opportunity to upvote if the question is asked, the question that is asked you would like to know as well. Our moderator will review incoming questions and share with the presenter during appropriate times throughout the webinar. Transcription services will be provided for every wellness seminar. To view live transcriptions, please select the CC button at the bottom right hand of your screen. Finally, a recording with the transcription will be provided to attendees following today's session, as well as being posted on our USAC website for review. So in partnership with the Employee Assistance Program, EAP, Preventing Burnout is a 30-minute presentation on compassion fatigue and compassion satisfaction. Learning the difference between compassion satisfaction, compassion fatigue, secondary trauma, and burnout. With Helka Casey guiding our conversation, she will explore what is in our control to help manage the symptoms and prevent burnout and work toward compassion satisfaction and wellness. Thank you so much for being here, Helka.
Thank you so much, Katie, and USAC as usual. I absolutely enjoy doing these presentations. So we are doing Preventing Burnout. We're going to look at the fatigue and we're going to look at the satisfaction, what we can do. Our goals today, let's talk about stress because hi, 2020. We're going to learn some concepts. We're going to learn the differences, like Katie stated earlier, between burnout, secondary trauma, compassion fatigue, and compassion satisfaction. We're going to look at the signs and symptoms. The signs are on the outside. The symptoms are kind of how we experience it. And then, of course, we're going to go to coping and prevention. Let's face it, our work can be overwhelming. And the challenge to maintain our resilience, which is that ability to bounce back from adversity, so we can keep doing the work that we do with care, energy, and compassion, is really important. In the simplest terms, compassion satisfaction can be thought of as the positive aspects of helping and the actual work that we do. And the good stuff, that's how we look at that. And then the negative aspects of helping and doing our work is the bad stuff, which is compassion fatigue. So stress, so what's the big deal? Well, stress is a part of everyone's life. As you can see from the screen, most of us usually go through it, and too much for too long, well, bad things can happen. About a third of Americans report living with extreme levels of super stress, and most of us usually go through it. Now, there's some type of stress that can feel good because it can motivate us to do things, like if we have something good to look forward to. But then that piece of it lasting too long, it can really impact us negatively, both physically and mentally. Some of the things that are stressing us out right now, home, especially since home has turned into our offices and schoolrooms, work, changes like with Workday, reorganization, and all those good things. The 24-hour news cycle and social media, people, holy moly. Let's also add some election stress that we're still going through, even though the election's done. And then we have, of course, our generalized uncertainty of just life. And then the uncertainty with COVID. when is it going to stop, right? When are we going to get back to quote unquote normal or to a new normal? Because it seems like every week we're learning more and we're getting more change. Additionally, this summer and fall, we have dealt with more public instances of racial injustice that have also made us feel very uncertain. Then you add financial concerns, and that's just in general, plus COVID inspired. And then of course, our own personal and social expectations. So there's types of stress. Believe it or not, like I said before, there is positive stress. It's called eustress. I find that interesting that it's called eustress because it just makes me laugh. This is that exciting, stressful events that we look forward to, such as like a wedding or a promotion or even a party that we're hosting. It kind of helps us stay motivated and work towards goals and feel good about life. But when we think about stress, we usually think of it in a negative way. And one might be chronic stress. This is the grinding stress that wears us down over the years. It arises from serious life problems that may be fundamentally beyond our control, such as poverty, war, or racism. And the demands are unrelenting, and you don't know when they will stop. You get by day, whether the cause lies in your mindset or difficult circumstances. Many of us stop fighting for change and just begin to accommodate to the chronic stress. I know a lot of our colleagues over at Wexner Medical have also felt that ongoing chronic stress with adjusting to working in a COVID-19 world, as well as the university side. We've had to deal with a lot. Our professors, our TAs, even our students, we've constantly been adjusting. And then there's distress. This is the mental strain from emotional pain or excessive worry that impacts your level of functioning. This is where we can feel very overwhelmed and the demands can be really high. So not to be too negative, let's move to the positive a little bit. How do you know you are stressed? So our emotional feelings, okay, we can feel anger, irritability, or frustration, very overwhelmed or nervous. Another big piece is we really have a difficult with focus and concentration, and our short-term memory can be impacted. We start forgetting the most recent stuff. Physical evidence, elevated blood pressure. Those of you with your Fitbits and your Apple Watches, we definitely pick up on that. We might get more sick because our immune system has been diminished because of the ongoing stress. We might have more body aches and pain. And then there's also social issues, trouble relating to other people at work or home, or we just don't see things as doable. We get overcome by difficulties at work and home. There's a picture, of course, in the little comic, there's a nurse, I'm afraid you failed your stress test. We are feeling a lot of this. So what are the effects of chronic stress? Like I stated before, we have that lowered immune functioning. It can definitely exacerbate anxiety and depression. It impacts our change in sleep. We might be struggling falling asleep, staying asleep, all those good things. We might be sleeping too much. Poor decision making. When you think about this, you might have been able to make like critical decisions. Think about work, like absolutely, you're decisive, get things done. But lately, because how this stress has been exacerbating, you're really kind of vacillating and struggling, making a determination. And once again, those short-term memory problems. And the piece with chronic stress, it can lead to burnout and compassion fatigue. Additionally, along with that lowered immune functioning, it can increase inflammatory disorders, prematurely age our internal systems too. This is a hoot. I'll give you a little page out of the Helka book here. A few years ago, prior to me joining Ohio State, I do have a inflammatory disorder, and I was also in this huge period of stress to the point that I didn't even know I had shingles. People, I was in my early 40s. What? It was the perfect storm of big stressors, ongoing stressors, health issues, and it just went together. And I was so used to chronic pain, I didn't even realize I had shingles until the stupid rash came. So this does happen. It does infect us mentally and physically. So let's talk a little bit about this. In addition to the chronic stress and the difficulty managing our stress responses, we can go to burnout. There are also personality traits that can contribute to this. Those of us with the type A personality, perfectionistic tendencies, the nothing is ever good enough, that kind of sets us up. A pessimistic view of yourself or the world. The need to be in control. Now, this does not mean in dominance, not the control. It really means the need for safety and therefore the reluctance to delegate to others. So it's not that we're control freaks, it's just we want everything to be done well, and so therefore we're not going to trust anybody else. Once again, those high achieving type A people. And then of course, if we've had a history of personal trauma or a loss history that results in increased vulnerability to the symptoms of that chronic stress, can lead to burnout. Burnout, just to read the definition, is a state of mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual exhaustion resulting from long-term involvement in emotionally demanding situations. Wow, that speaks a lot to our university population, doesn't it? It's associated with the routine hassles of work, and it's a subtle onset, gradually increasing dissatisfaction with work, maybe the work environment, or even sometimes your career choice. And also feelings of being ineffective, becoming more insensitive, maybe you're a little bit more negative, emotionally absent, feeling stuck. Burnout can result from the stresses in the work environment. This is per Jennifer Brandt, who's a PhD and licensed social worker with our Veterinary College of Medicine. And she also states that if you're experiencing problems with coworkers, loss of economic security or position, or diminished control, burnout can start to set in. And she identified 3 primary characteristics: the emotional exhaustion that you might feel, feeling drained, exhausted, or overloaded, and the physical problems that can go along with that, including stomach pains or good old gastrointestinal fun, depersonalization, in developing a callous or uncaring feeling, even hostility towards others, either their clients, colleagues, coworkers, customers, doesn't matter. And then reduced personal accomplishment, that sense of you're just not feeling like it's worthwhile at work, that your contribution really isn't valued, and you're also not getting a sense of satisfaction. And that can lead also to poor job performance and lack of motivation. So here are the signs of burnout. Kind of asking yourself, have you become more cynical or critical at work? Do you have to drag yourself to go, whether work right now is in your spare bedroom or on campus? Have you become irritable or impatient with your coworkers or customers? Do you lack the energy to be consistently productive? That does not mean 24/7 productive, but more as productive as you were prior to burnout. Do you find it hard to concentrate? Yes, pandemic productivity and quarantine fatigue have definitely hit me a bit. Do you lack satisfaction from your achievements at work? Do you feel disillusioned about your job? Are you overusing food, alcohol, or drugs to kind of simply not feel or to escape what you're feeling? Have your sleep habits changed? And have you been troubled by unexplained headaches, stomach aches, or gastrointestinal distress and other physical complaints? I'll give you an idea of burnout. We knew that in the mid-May, we were going to get a lot more clients coming in. I work at the EAP. I am one of your internal therapists. We knew we were going to get more clients. We were ready for it. Bring it on. We got it. And then we knew it would kind of lighten up over the summer. People are getting used to COVID again. They're holding on really tight. We knew they were going to loosen that grip in about September. And we were right. We had a lot more clients coming in September. I was already starting to feel what I like to call crispy. I was starting to get a little irritable. I was getting a little negative focused, and I noticed that within myself. I'm a therapist, so we do these skills all the time. So I was a little self-aware. And I told my boss, I'm going to need a 4-day weekend coming up here pretty soon. When does it work for the team? Because the Helk is getting a little crispy and I want to prevent some burnout. So I did. And I also upped my self-care. I was able to prevent burnout. So being self-aware will really help you in this process as well. I want to introduce to you, some of you may have not heard of this, but this is called secondary traumatic stress. This is a little bit different than burnout. This is the indirect trauma that can occur when we are experiencing a difficult or disturbing images and stories secondhand. Now think of a lot of you. Some of you work directly with students. Maybe you work with the academic side. Maybe some of you are listening from Wexner's side. This is when you're listening to other people's trauma. This can happen a lot when we're hearing about student stories. Our students go through a lot, don't they? And there's a lot of times we refer them to counseling and consultation. And sometimes we hear from our fellow staff and you refer them to me at the Employee Assistance Program. The secondary traumatic stress is basically the concept that there's a piece here that you cannot walk through water constantly and not get wet. We're constantly hearing other people's trauma, sadness, or situations. We're going to be impacted just as if we walked through water. So this can make us feel like post-traumatic stress disorder. It can feel very similar, even though we're not the ones who went through the direct trauma. So just be mindful of that. It can definitely impact professionals who work in high stress and trauma exposed fields, such as child abuse investigators, prosecutors, judges, therapists, healthcare professionals, even animal shelter workers. And I would also say, because of our population, anybody who's working with students on the regular, it really does impact us. And over time, repeated exposure to difficult content can have a negative impact on our functioning and overall mental health. And it is important to develop a sense of our own individual warning signs and develop tools to mitigate those negative effects. So that is just something I want you to be mindful of. Signs of secondary traumatic stress is hypervigilance. That's when we're totally hyper-focused. You hear a noise and you're like, what? It's kind of like that, where you're constantly scanning your environment. The inability to embrace complexity. It's where you kind of get overwhelmed and you're like, I can't even think through this right now. The inability to listen. This is when we start to avoid our clients, our customers, our students, or we kind of, because we're getting uncomfortable, we might shut them down while they're processing with us. We might feel a little bit more anger and feel a little bit more cynical about the world because we're hearing so many negative things and not getting a more accurate picture of the world by also hearing positive things. It's happening a lot right now. And then just sleeplessness, just overwhelming sense of fear, and the chronic exhaustion and physical ailments. So what we've seen in the research is burnout, if we didn't get to deal with it, if we didn't process it or get the help that we needed in time, plus secondary trauma, can equal compassion fatigue. So burnout has more to do with our work environment and getting kind of worn out from that. Secondary trauma is literally that, hearing the indirect exposure to other people's trauma. And compassion fatigue, this is the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering, loss, and daily and not be touched by it. Is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water after getting wet. That's really moving to it, okay? That's how that link is from the secondary trauma to the compassion fatigue, okay? Remember, compassion fatigue can be thought of as the negative aspects of helping professions. It's the bad stuff associated with our work as helpers. It is the physical and emotional exhaustion that arises from the constant demand to be compassionate and effective in helping those in need. And the stress from doing the emotional labor. It's the natural consequence of helping people and animals who are in need. So it's associated with pain and suffering of the clients and customers and patients that we work with. Onset can be sudden, unlike burnout. We've kind of built up. We can be preoccupied with the feelings and experiences of our clients, customers, and patients. We can feel the personal responsibility for their trauma and suffering because we feel sometimes we have to have the answers. And it's more involved with the well-being of the patient than our own. What truly distinguishes compassion fatigue from burnout is that while burnout springs from where you work, compassion fatigue is associated with the work that you do. Compassion fatigue is going to go where you are. A job switch is not going to fix that. So be mindful that even the long overdue vacation isn't going to fix it either. Okay, the intrusive negative thoughts and physical problems, loss of hope, or questioning one's contribution can really follow you. So that's why for me, when I had that burnout piece and I was just starting to feel crispy, a little time off was helpful to help prevent all this. So that's important to know. Signs of compassion fatigue. First, you should understand that it's a process. It's not a matter of one day you're living your life with a great deal of energy, enjoyment, and then next you wake up exhausted and devoid of any energy. So it's compassion fatigue develops over time as well. It can take weeks and sometimes years to surface. Now, mind you, burnout has a lot more to do with where you're at. Compassion fatigue, it can happen as we build up, but we feel it immediately. We just start getting blunted. So it can cause emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion. We see a reduced sense of personal accomplishment or meaning in our work. We really try to isolate our interactions with others and really try to avoid even more. It's a loss of morale. There's depersonalization. Basically symptoms that are disconnected from our real causes. We just don't want to. We're just done. Loss of self-worth. Your self-identity and worldview is impacted as compassion fatigue. We start doing this generalization when we're in compassion fatigue. I'm not good at what I do. Like, I'm not a good therapist, I would say. And therefore, I'm not a good coworker, and I'm not a good this, and I'm not a good that. And it starts generalizing. And then my worldview starts to get impacted by it too. There's no good in the world. We start going into absolutes. And when we go through compassion fatigue, we're more prone to depression and PTSD. One of the questions we had is, do you think there's an uptick in compassion fatigue in educators in this current environment? If so, how do we support our educators that we work with? I do think there's an uptick right now in compassion fatigue only because there's an uptick in stressors overall. This is where learning how to do stress management is really helpful. Working with your meditation, maybe focusing on resilience, self-care, working on protected time. I will go more into some of the coping aspects that we can get to. So sometimes we want to know, is this burnout? Is this secondary trauma, stress? What's going on? There's a great self-assessment instrument. It's called the ProQuil. I have used this for several types of professions. I actually did a self-care discussion about 2-3 years ago for Ohio outreach librarians, because even they experience stress, and because they're constantly dealing with the community, sometimes the elderly community, maybe they lose one of their patrons. It's been really difficult for them, or they get into some really interesting situations. So some of them were feeling some of these things. So I suggested the ProQuil. It's wonderful. It helps measure your compassion satisfaction, levels of burnout, and secondary traumatic stress, and helps you kind of find where you need to put your focus. It's a really helpful tool. Literally Google ProQuil. You can do it on your own. It's really interesting. We actually do this for our graduate medical education wellness program. We help our residents out and they do a ProQuil so we can kind of measure where they're at. So if we had burnout plus secondary trauma, and then we put in some compassion satisfaction and coping skills, we can prevent compassion fatigue. So this definitely goes back out to somebody who just asked a question, what do? We need to get back to compassion satisfaction, okay? So compassion satisfaction is literally the pleasure you derive from being able to do your work. Think about 2 key words, meaning and fulfillment, okay? Perhaps you find pleasure to help others throughout the work that you do. Maybe you feel positively about your colleagues or your ability to contribute to the work setting or even the greater good of society through the work that you do. I know for me, I'm a therapist, so I like to think I help people. That definitely helps me feel better about my day. At the end of the day, I ask myself 2 things. In my code of ethics and conduct, it's non-malfeasance, which is to not cause harm. And the second is benefits, to benefit. Some days I might have just gotten to the no harm button. I would prefer to get to the benefit button. Sometimes it doesn't always work. So I kind of ask myself, did I cause harm today? Or did I help somebody smile? Did I help somebody understand themselves better? That gives me a lot of extra mojo to keep going and feel good, because it feels like I have meaning in my job. I have purpose and fulfillment. So this is the good stuff about the work that we do. So tips to increase compassion satisfaction. Honestly, get educated. If you know you're at risk for compassion fatigue, taking the time to learn the signs and symptoms, much like today's presentation, is going to be helpful in a means of prevention. Practicing self-care. Now, please note, I'm a therapist. Of course, I'm going to say self-care, right? Because that's what we do. But self-care goes so much more than just the random mani-pedi or getting a massage or just taking a day off. It's really working on your self-preservation and what you need. And when we think about self-care, think about, your spiritual self-care, your physical self-care, your social, your mental, your emotional. Where are you maybe needing a little bit more of a boost? Setting emotional boundaries. It is so important to do this. Those emotional boundaries, if somebody is draining you, it's okay to say no. And it's a challenge, don't get me wrong. It's a challenge to remain compassionate, empathetic, and supportive of others without becoming overly involved and taking on another's pain. So setting those emotional boundaries helps maintain a connection while still remembering and honoring the fact that you are a separate person and for your own needs. I tell myself and other care providers on the daily, your client or your customer is a part of their treatment plan, education plan, what have you. It is not all on you. They also have to be an active member in their academic wellness, physical, mental, emotional wellness. They're part of it. And sometimes we cannot work harder than our patients or customers. It's just how it is. So that helps me kind of keep balance. I meet my clients where they're at, and I will put my energy in and I'll support them, and I'm going to meet them where they're at. So I am not overdoing it. So I get depleted. That's important to do. Also engage in outside hobbies. We need some things outside of our workspace. I know our professions are important to us. They're a part of our identity, but we need to vary things up a little bit. I've really worked on this one more because of COVID, because I've been quarantined, and my office and my home are all in the same space. So I do a little separation of church and state. My office is in my spare bedroom. I usually don't go in here. I also started painting more. My friend sent me a paint by number Yoda. It was a Boston Terrier as a Yoda. It was great, and it got me all excited to do some art again. So I've been doing that more. Cultivating those healthy friendships out of work is important. So we've got some of that support and also enjoyment. Keeping a journal. This does not have to be an everyday journal, but sometimes we need a place just to get our feelings out or our thoughts out. Do it. Boosting your resiliency. One big thing about resiliency is thinking about the growth mindset. So doing some research on that can really help you out. If you have questions, feel free to email us at eap@osumc.edu, or you can email me. I'm fine with that. Try to use healthier coping skills, go out for a walk, even right now, get out in the sunshine. It's very helpful. Identifying workplace strategies. This means really part of the compassion fatigue prevention is when our employers and direct supervisors understand a little bit more about what's going on. So if we can have more support groups within our team, open discussions about it. This is one of the benefits of having this training is we now have some shared language, doing routine check-ins, doing regular breaks. Somebody asked in regards to mental health days. We do have sick leave. You'll have to check your policy and how your department really looks at mental health days. I have a very open relationship with my boss. She's also a therapist. So I can be like, I need to take a day off. We can work on that. But really you have to look at the policy and how your management team looks at that. And then also seeking therapy. Employee assistance program, you all get 5 complimentary counseling sessions per issue per year. You can either work with us at the internal team or we'll get you linked with a therapist in the community. Sometimes we just need to talk about some different strategies, and that's okay. Additional self-care and coping strategies, honestly, getting back to our basic needs, which is sleep, nutrition, and exercise. If you don't like the exercise word, I like to say movement. Move a little more than you did yesterday. Plan some time off. That can help just to kind of get a little bit more focus on you to rest and recharge. Trying to stay accurate because it's really easy for the brain. It's naturally geared to kind of look at the negative. It's an old defense mechanism that just doesn't always help us all the time. So having some more daily affirmations and having some more accurate perspective is helpful. Managing those boundaries, that can even be time boundaries, which we don't need to keep working over if we don't need to. Unless there's a continuity of care issue for a student or a customer or a patient, if we can stop at 5, if that's your quitting time, quit. Try to do that more days than not, if possible. Do more of what you enjoy. So that's a big one. I like my dogs. So right after this, I'm going to go play with my dogs because they bring me a little joy. And when I say smile, this is not me telling all the women in the room, you just need to smile more. What this is for all of us. When we smile, all that good stuff, the dopamine, serotonin gets released, and we do, at least for a moment, feel a little better. So do that. Spend time with those that you enjoy. Oh, and this one's a hard one because you could do a whole series on saying no. Try to say no. It's okay to say no to some things, or to say no, not right now. I can work on that later. Because sometimes when we say no to others, we say yes to us. Oh, that was cheesy. I like that one. And then just plan events and travel or things to look forward to. I know that looks a little different in a COVID-19 world, but we can even look forward to going to the park. We can look forward to having a nice meal together. There's ways that we can do this if we can't really get out too much because of some of the restrictions. And then also just to kind of, as a self-reflection, kind of ask yourself, where are you at? Are you in a state of eustress? Are you just stressed? Are you burned out? Or are you at compassion fatigue? And we can be at different levels with different situations or different topics as well. And then how could you work on developing a little bit more compassion satisfaction in your job? And what I would charge all of you to do is plan at least one self-care activity for yourself today. Like I said before, you do have 5 complimentary counseling sessions per issue per year with the Employee Assistance Program, either with your internal OSU EAP team, or we'll get you linked into the community. About 70% of our community therapists are also paneled with the OSU Health Insurance. And there's also Tess. She's a little chat bot. You can kind of chat her up. She can give you some realistic, good psychoeducation and suggestions for what you may be experiencing. Don't worry about memorizing this. It's also all available on our website. Just Google OSU EAP and you'll find us. I'd love you to join me for Fridays, on Fridays for Buckeye Break. It is a 30-minute virtual hangout with real talk from your peers and a member of the EAP team. You can get linked up in Link to Health. Also, we are offering mental health awareness workshops. We have a track for managers and we have a track for staff. This can be, you can invite us to present to your department. We also have some general offerings also available on Link to Health. And if you have a moment, I would like to have an evaluation. I am actually asking for feedback to see how I can improve and better serve you. So that just use your QR scan and you can do that. I will also make sure USAC has our link to our survey and they can share that with you as well. I am going to stop sharing the screen so I can talk to you. Hello, everyone. And I'm going to take a look at some of these questions. Okay, somebody had shared, it's hard to take those breaks when work keeps piling on. Oh, yes. And you know, the whole team is experiencing burnout as well. Also, if you take off, you'll just be overwhelmed when you return. Any suggestions? Yes. We need to at least take a 10-minute break. If we can work with our team saying, look, I'm going out for a quick walk. I just need a breather. That's great. That can work whether we're in a hybrid environment, in the office, or at home. We need to talk about this in our meetings too. Maybe talk to your immediate supervisor or manager and just say, how can we make our culture a little bit more accepting of this? And I agree, taking time off is a double-edged sword. It's always been it. I know as a therapist, 40 hours a week is never enough time to do my job, let alone take time off. There does need to be a priority set, because if you are depleted, you're not going to get what you need. So trying to make you a priority is going to be important, and talk to your team about how we can make that a little bit better for everyone. Somebody else said, if I have, say, just 2 or 3 of those signs of bad stress or compassion fatigue, am I stressed or fatigued? I think it's a little bit of both. And I'm not so worried about your label, but more of what can you do? Now that you know that you're toggling possibly between those two items, those 2 labels, ask yourself, what can I put in? Can I afford 10 minutes of self-care? A day? Can I ask myself, at work, can I have one priority that I really need to get done and one thing I enjoy? I do a work-life balance discussion as well, and we talk a lot about that, is identifying one thing I need to achieve, one thing I'd like to enjoy in my work day. That will help start building your positive sentiment override in regards to work to prevent compassion fatigue. And then also ask yourself, what do I need for burnout? Do I need to end my day earlier? Do I need to take some time off the screens? Do I need to just do an hour of no email? I know, shocking here at OSU. But kind of ask those questions, what? You're going to find a lot more empowerment in there versus the label, but you're noticing some self-awareness there. Also take the ProQuil, that might help you out as well. Someone else shared, what if my stress comes from a feeling or maybe reality of not being able or not having time to do some self-care? Oh, my Lanta, yes. Everybody deals with this one, whoever wrote this. The perception, especially those of us who might be a little bit more type A or prone to anxiety. When we look at the word self-care, we're like, I need at least an hour or an evening to plan this. It can be on your drive home from work, listening to some nice music, or even listening to a book on tape to take a break. Those are book on tape, boy, did I just put my age out there, Audible. There's ways to do that, or a good podcast. Maybe it's trying to take a walk at lunch just for 10 minutes. It might be just doing a breathing exercise for 3 minutes. So whatever you can do to slowly build it in, you're going to still get a benefit from. It doesn't always have to be a big chunk of time. Bear with me, my screen just moved a bit. Woo, it's moving big time. Thank you, Janet. Somebody said they like that example, so that's good. Any other questions that you might have? I just saw my Q&A screen go really quick. If I didn't answer them for you, please email us at eap@osumc.edu, and we'd be happy to do that. Also, my email is helka.casey@osumc.edu. I'm the only Helka on campus, so you're going to find me. So if there was a question that you'd like to ask but didn't want to do it in this format, that's totally fine. We're here to support you.
Thank you so much, Helka. Really appreciate your time and your perspective. You're always such a joy to listen to when you present. You just make me laugh and smile the entire time. Thank you so much. And for those of you who are still on, we will be sending out the recording of the webinar, and you'll be able to refer back to all the wonderful resources that Helka shared. So we appreciate you all being here today, and hope everybody can stay healthy and well. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, USAC. Bye, Katie. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.